Today is May 21st, and the time is 9 a.m. On the dot, I would like to call to order the public hearing for the City of Tampa Historic Preservation Commission. Welcome, everyone. I am Dominique Cobb, the Chair for Historic Preservation, and I would like for the commissioners to introduce themselves.
Tom Placon.
Carrie Ann Canch.
Bruce Gibson.
And we have, and also while our other commissioners coming in, we have a new commissioner, Mr. Bruce Gibson. If you'd like to give a short bio on where you're coming from and how you'll be adding to the commission today.
Thank you. I am a recently retired architect here in the city of Tampa. I have a master's degree in architecture from the University of South Florida. I also live in a house built in 1925, which is in the Hampton Terrace district in part of Seminole Heights. And I've been a resident of the city of Tampa since 1997 and moved to the area in 1989.
Well, we bring you greetings, and we would like to introduce our other commissioner.
Sorry for being late. Susan Swift, Boggs Engineering and Boggs Design Partners.
And also staff. Is it time yet? Or you can introduce yourself. Oh, I can? All right, our lovely staff here today for the city of Tampa. Give your name.
Alexis Guzman.
All right. And our presenter.
Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff.
And our
And Kamari Pettis-Mackle from the Legal Department.
greetings. Thank you all for coming today. If you're here to present a request, please be thorough but concise at the microphone. Identify yourself and your relationship to the projects before beginning the presentation. The commissioners will not ask any questions during the presentation. Next, we will have staff present the staff report.
Madam Chair, can you go to item number 3, which is approving of the minutes from March 19th?
Yes. All right, commissioners. We have the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for March 19. Give you a few moments to read that over. We would like to pass or deny if all in agreement.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from March 19th.
I'll second.
All right. The minutes from March 19th have been approved.
We get to do a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, do we need to do?
That motion passed.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for joining us today. We have a new section that we would like to introduce that it's called Preservation in Progress. We've been showing this to the Architecture Review Commission and the Barrio Latino Commission for a couple of months. It's just sort of to bring you up to speed on how some of the projects that have been approved by our various commissions have been completed, and just to let you see sort of the outcome of the efforts that go into your volunteer hours. If we can go to the presentation here. This month we're presenting an infill project in the Tampa Heights Historic District. This project was reviewed by the Architectural Review Commission for infill housing on Adderley Street. This is the sandbar map from 1915 showing that particular area where these new houses have been constructed. The parcels where the houses are now are outlined in red. You can see that this was strictly a residential area at that time in 1915. This is the more recent aerial map. This one's from 1922, showing the parcels in green there. I'm sorry, in red. They're just east of Florida Avenue. Adderley Street sort of is the street to the north of the parcels, and it sort of curves and then crosses Morgan Street and continues on east there. Shady Lane Street, interestingly, was an alley until about the sometime in the 1940s when it was vacated and became a proper street. So these parcels are kind of interesting in that they're considered to have two fronts. So that gave us sort of a design challenge in and of itself for how to site the houses properly. So looking at these three houses, the first one was 207 East Adderley Street, a single-family residence with site improvements. The ARC approved this as well as the others on February 9th. You can see this one, they all face Adderley Street. All the houses do. Their front doors and porches are facing Adderley Street. In this case, the house has the parking coming in from Adderley Street, and there's a porte cochere attached to the house. And the parking is beyond the porte cochere on the side of the house. The next one over, 211 East Adderley Street, also faces Adderley. It has the parking coming in from the rear off Shady Lane. And then finally, the parcel on the corner has a, faces Adderley Street, this time Adderley's on the north here, with the parking coming off the rear off Shady Lane as well. And as part of the Tampa Heights design guidelines, there is a requirement that houses on a corner property have a wraparound porch. So you can see on the site plan here that the porch does indeed wrap around from the front, the Adderley Street side to the Morgan Street side on the east. These are the elevations that were reviewed by the Architectural Review Commission. Again, all different plans. The two-story houses, one with a wraparound porch, and the one-story house with the one-story bungalow with the porte cochere. And this is how they turned out. So we're, as part of the Architectural Review Commission's process after the public hearings and after the drawings and documents for construction are approved, we have a historic preservation inspector who visits the projects once a week to make sure that everything's being constructed in accordance with our approved plans, and not just meeting building codes, but also the design requirements that were put in place by the ARC. So this is the property before in 2019. And then this is how it looks now. So that's a pretty dramatic difference, and we're very happy with this infill project on Adderley. So at this time, we'll continue with the conflict of interest and ex parte communication.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the Legal Department. Commissioners, can you please state on the record whether or not you have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
No conflicts.
I do not.
Additionally, will the Commissioners please state whether or not you had any ex parte communications regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
No.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and with that, we can move to the swear-in. Ms. Guzman?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. And the first item that we have on the agenda for your consideration this morning is the Jackson House update. We have with us today Mr. Elise Drongo he's our Deputy Administrator for Development and Economic Opportunity. Welcome him. Thank you.
And just a reminder, Commissioners, this is Mr. Drumgo's just giving an informational update. There's no action for the Commission to take at this time.
Thank you. Good morning, Commission. For the record, again, Elise Drumgo, Deputy Administrator for Development and Economic Opportunity. I'm just providing this update for you all. As you recall, I came in last fall, I believe, and shared that the city had brokered an agreement with the adjacent property owners of the Jackson House for them to convey property to the city, and there were a series of conditions that needed to be met. Since then, we've been working pretty diligently on this. It's complex, but just to bring you up to speed on the work that we've done behind the scenes. On May 9th, part of this agreement is that the city will fund the right-of-way improvements at Nebraska and Twiggs. And so those right-of-way improvements, they have to be funded. The funds have to be in place before FDOT will convey property, which is a part of this whole deal to get property over to the Jackson House. So I'm pleased to say that the CRA agreed to fund those infrastructure improvements for Nebraska and Twiggs at its May 9th regular meeting. After that meeting with the board, we then convened with the Jackson House Foundation representatives of the Tampa Bay History Center and of the Venning Family Foundation to talk through how we wanted to structure this. Because of the complexity, we don't want to have what we deem several quarterbacks or people who are attempting to manage this project. And so as a collective, we agreed that the History Center would be best suited to handle this process. But the way that the state funding is set up, those funds are set to be dispersed to the city and to the Jackson House Foundation. So you can imagine that we have to get the approval of the state in order to allow for that to happen. So our Deputy City Attorney, Morris Massey, is working on a funding agreement to allow for the city's funds to be assigned to the Tampa Bay History Center. But in order for us to get there, the state has to review and approve that agreement, and then the city will provide that template to the Jackson House Foundation so that the Jackson House Foundation can then have that agreement adopted before its board, and the Tampa Bay History Center can do the same. So again, a lot of complexity, a lot of bodies that need to approve said agreements before we can even start on the construction aspect of it. And some of the things that we discussed with the state last week, very specific on procurement because we have to get into the weeds on it. And so we wanted to make sure that the two grant assignments meet the state's requirements for procurement, and that is for goods and services. And I will tell you that the procurement of the goods and services, meaning architectural, engineering, the plan documents that need to be drafted in order for the state to then review them and approve them, the procurement of those services has to follow our local guidelines, the city's guidelines. And so we cannot go out and just get architects and engineers and hire them now to commence the work because those things do need to be approved by the state. So I just wanted to lay that out, give you an update. Morris Massey is working on the funding agreement for the infrastructure improvements, which will be between the city and FDOT, and the city, the CRA, and FDOT. And then he's also working on a funding agreement which would effectively assign the grant funding of the city to the Tampa Bay History Center. And again, the bodies, the state has to approve it, our council will likely have to approve it, and also the History Center, their board will have to approve it as well. So a lot of complexity. We'll take that agreement and then provide it to the Jackson House Foundation so they can do the same. So we're still working at it, and I'll stop and I'll stand for any questions that you all may have.
Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time?
Could you refresh our memory about kind of the basic, the adjacent owner and how, kind of why we're here, and who is that adjacent owner?
I see. So the Accardi family, they own the property adjacent to the Jackson House, and I apologize if
That's right.
for not providing that background. But effectively, the property, the Jackson House sits at 0 lot lines, so it sits on the property lines. In order to have buffer to maintain the historical designation and to utilize materials that would help the Jackson House retain its historical status, there needs to be a specific buffer. And so the Accardi family has agreed to work with the city in order to provide that property to the Jackson House in order for the restoration to take place and for the property lines to be extended out about 10 feet, the entire length of the east and west boundaries of that property. So, so with that, that's kind of how we got here, is where there's been a stalemate between the two entities to have that property conveyed in order to allow the restoration to take place. I will say that the Accardis have been very cooperative with us, and the agreement that we have in place, we've had to extend it several times to allow us to meet the conditions of the agreement so that this property can be conveyed.
I just have a few follow-ups. So that's a 10-foot, they're actually, the adjacent owner is giving or selling 10 feet?
They would
Or it's a temporary construction easement?
So it'd be the property owner would convey in perpetuity the 10 feet on both sides of the property to the city, which will in turn work with the Jackson House for them to receive that property. The Accardis have been willing to provide a temporary construction easement as well throughout this process, and they've shared that they would do that. And I think the intent is that they will do that ultimately down the line, because they'll need more, what we call staging area and more operational area for the restoration eventually.
What, I promise, last question.
That's okay, please.
The access or road improvements that the CRA is paying for,
Yes.
will the adjacent owner benefit from that?
So I will say that, the way the right-of-way is set up, and I'll share that agreement back through staff, but the way the agreement is set up is that those right-of-way improvements are improving there's somewhat of a pork chop of a lane there that doesn't seem to be functional, and it's not highly used. And so FDOT is willing to vacate that and allow for us to convey some of that property to the property owner in exchange for the property that we will be receiving from the Accardis.
To the
So,
adjacent owner
to-
in exchange for this?
Correct.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. If I recall correctly, the goal eventually is for this to become a museum?
Well, I don't want to speak for the Jackson House
Right.
Foundation. I think that that's better suited for their intent down the line. I think that there have been discussions about a potential museum, but I don't want to speak for them, because I don't know that they have the capacity from an operations standpoint
Right.
to be able to do that. And I think part of this partnership with the History Center is for them to just continue to grow that relationship, also to have them lead in the restoration process, because the Jackson House Foundation does not have the capacity to do that either. So I think this is potentially a budding relationship that may lead to a museum down the line.
This isn't a question, I'm an archaeologist at USF, and sometime between when you acquire the right-of-way and when you start the restoration, if we could get in and do a little small-scale excavation that might, with some community involvement even, generate some artifacts that could be used for display purposes or something.
And just for clarity, are you referring to on the Jackson House?
Yeah, I know there's
on
not
the
much,
side?
that's unpaved there, but there's a little corner off the back porch, I think, where we could do a little, it would be kind of fun and maybe raise the profile of the project a little.
So I can take that back to the foundation and certainly
Thank you.
share that
Yeah.
information with them. And I will say for this, for the commission, the intent is to come back with a full update on the project with timelines once we get through the processes that are necessary. So once we meet all the conditions, to come back with a full project timeline, cost estimation. I mean, I think the costs are probably going up by the day for this thing. And so, we do intend to come back before city council and to this body to provide that update.
Thank you, Mr. Drumgo, for coming in and giving the update. I do have a few questions myself. One from the community input stance. I know that where that property is, there has been, how do I say, high gentrification. There has also been a portion where the community has not been involved, or we know about things as they happen. From the historic preservation point, is there anything that we can do to make sure that the community is involved, not only in the updates, because I do believe the commission has been asking for over 6 months for your office to come in to give an update. Thank goodness that we're here today, but in the meantime, we go and see that property once a month. And with the hurricane season coming up, I think we're about 10 days out. The building does not look stable. And also with the summer tours that will be coming to the area, we would like to be able to give information on that. So is there any way that the community can be involved in this portion and also have representation? I know that the Jackson House is involved, but also this is a part of a community that is outside of the Jackson House. We know that we have this train station there. We have Tampa Heights Community Center that's adjacent to that as well. But again, we don't know about anything until 6 months or when it's actually happening.
So I'll take that in two parts. You mentioned the gentrification in the area, and this is a pretty desolate area where it's parking lots. The adjacent area, it's parking lots, and I think part of the conversations that we've had, like it or not, You know, the Accardi family acquired their property through the American dream. You come in, you have a business model, and you execute that. And they've done that very well throughout the city. And so I know that historically, between urban renewal and redlining, that there were things that impacted this community that led us to where we are today, where, you know, properties were mishandled, and, you know, unfortunately, I think that the population that used to be there, they aren't there anymore. And I will say that at some point, there's a real chance the Accardis intend to develop their property. And the Jackson House will be the one thing that is sitting center of all the redevelopment or the development that takes place, because they do have development rights. So I think that our execution on this side to attempt to get the 10-foot buffer is to ensure that there is space and that the Jackson House, it stands in the current location. And that's something that I've tried to be very direct about, to keep the team focused on. We want to restore the Jackson House. You know, there's no way to undo, I think, what's been done, so to speak, but from a historical standpoint, but we want to make sure the Jackson House stands as a reminder. When you talk about community involvement, this is something I have to communicate back to Dr. Collins in this team. When we talk about updates and we want to make it tangible, I think that Dennis, Mr. Fernandez has been a part of this process as well. And for us, we've been very cautious to overshare information because we don't want to provide any false hope. It takes time. And these processes, you know, between vacates, coordinating with FDOT, ensuring that we do the restoration of that right-of-way, all of these things, the additional vacates that have to happen, those are all subjected to public hearings. And so we want to be mindful of that too. And I think there will be a time for the community to be involved when you talk about potentially donating dollars to a museum, making sure that people show up to support the Jackson House and the work that's occurring. But right now, we just need to get this thing locked in, and we need to get all parties on board. And I think the more attention we call to it, the more opinions that we hear, the more likely that people will step away from the table. And folks have been very patient throughout this process. I think the Accardis, that family, they've been very collaborative, and I don't want to do anything to upset that. You know, I don't want anything to be said or misinterpreted in a way that anyone will feel like they need to deviate from the plan that we set forth. So, again, I'll take this back to the team to talk about some level of community engagement, and back to the Jackson House Foundation to see what their plan is, and they can have that discussion. Perhaps there will be some level of an engagement plan once the restoration commences, but I can certainly take that back for consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Drumbo. I'm sorry, I'm new. I haven't heard any previous presentations, and otherwise only what I've read in the newspaper. Sure. So, but I would like to ask a clarification on some of the terms that I heard you use today, and I've seen in the paper, and that has to do with what you're calling a 10-foot buffer. And I'm wondering exactly what the definition and justification is for that from a legal and code standpoint.
Sure. So that justification is the type of material and the combination of the historical designation. There are a certain number of openings or the fenestration associated with that building. And in order to maintain that historical designation, it's important for the building to be restored very similar, as close to its current state or the way it stood in the past. There are some material swaps that could occur to allow for that building to sit at 0 lot line, but those would not be original materials. They would not be, some of the openings would need to be faux openings, or the facade would not be the same. And so from a code perspective, I think that's where it's a wrestling between the authenticity of what was originally, and then for the Jackson House to be able to maintain that designation. And as you all know, being in this space, that historical designation is important for future funding, for future grants, and for additional grant funding for the Jackson House. And so if it is to become a museum, there's a real chance that there will need an operating budget. They will need additional support funding, and those things would be at jeopardy if there was not enough buffer to put back materials that were compatible or similar to the originals.
If I could follow up on that then. It sounds like the buffer you're talking about is a fire separation distance.
Correct.
Because of the building type.
That's correct.
But my recollection, and I didn't check the Florida Building Code because I wasn't expecting to need to, but I thought that an existing structure had, was already accepted by the code, and that it would be a new structure, it would inhibit the development of a new structure on an adjacent property, not the maintenance of an existing historic facility. So I can understand why, from the practical matter, you would want a 10-foot buffer if you're managing a historic property, but I'm not clear completely which is the reasoning for this.
Sure. So I can follow up with you, Mr. Gibson. I think we've gone through this ad nauseum with our fire folks, with JC in building, and so you know, we deliberated on this quite a bit based upon where the Jackson House is headed to arrive at this approach, and so you know, I won't say it's interpretation or leave it to interpretation, and so I think that if you have additional questions about that, I would ask the folks who are the professionals that serve in that space to come and speak to it. Sure.
Oh, yes, so, yeah, thank you for sharing and your progress. I think that's good. And I drove by it, not like, I think St. Patty's Day, actually. And yeah, it's like in a really desolate area I could see the redevelopment, like it's prime for it. And so to maintain the historic fabric within that, I don't know what that's gonna look like in the future. But yeah, I think even with the 10-foot buffer, it makes sense because you don't know what's gonna be built up around it in the future. And that's the way Tampa's going. So thank you for sharing the update. And I do want to ask a question. So the funding that's been approved through the History Center, is that just to stabilize the building? Because hurricane season is coming. So it's like, I don't think, but when we get caught up in all the rigmarole and the legalistic and all this stuff, the building is sitting there unprotected. So is that what the approval for the funding right now is to do?
So the approval of the grant funding is actually to basically go through and procure the services and to execute the project itself. I can tell you that our recent conversations with the state, in those conversations, the architects and engineers have to prepare plans, and those plans have to be approved at the state level. And so from a procurement perspective, we cannot engage with the professionals that are necessary until we have the lead agency in place to do the work. And that's why I say that the assignment agreements are necessary. I mean, we've peeled back all the layers to try to figure out how to get the funding to the lead agency, which at this point we've deemed to be the Tampa Bay History Center. So, you know, we want to go forward with the work, but even the emergency stabilization, those plans do need to be reviewed, and because we have to follow procurement guidelines to obtain the services, then there's no action. And I think that's what you all are getting at, is why is there no action? Because the funding is in place, but there's a process. And I think that getting all parties to agree to the process, to the payment structures, to take their hands off the wheel and say, let's let this money go to this organization and allow them to administer the grant process and to, you know, all those things. It took a lot to get here, to get to this point. And that's convincing some folks to set their egos to the side and allow it to take place. So I just say that, you know, I know that it is hurricane season, and there's a chance it could, you know, there's a real chance that it could fall. I mean, the stabilization is not holding the way it is. But the reality is that we are here now, and the process that we're going through, it is ideal for us that we get through it soon enough without a major weather incident that would reduce it, and, you know, the Jackson House would collapse.
Thank you for sharing and elaborating on that.
Sure.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Canch's question, assuming this, none of us can control hurricane season, but it sounds like it's going to be a bad one. But assuming this all moves ahead as quickly as possible, is this grant money, or is there enough money in a budget now, whether it's grant money or city money or whoever money, to restore or just to stabilize this? What's the budget right now give us?
Sure, so I can't say, and I can't say because the plan set itself, and please keep in mind, I am not, I'm not a part of their project management team in that way, right? I've come to facilitate an agreement between all these parties. That's what I've come for. And so in being the person that is facilitating that, I am willing to answer your questions as to how we got there with a facilitated agreement to do certain things. But from a construction standpoint, construction costs have gone up. I've seen preliminary estimates, $4.5 million with funds coming from various sources. But again, you don't know until you get structural in there. You get a 100% construction plan set of documents, and that gets bid out to a contractor. And then the contractor tells you, here's what it costs to do the thing that you like to do. And so we're very early on in this process in which I think some evaluations have been done, but it's never gotten to 100% plan set because, again, in order to procure the services, in order to obtain the services, to go through that process of having the architects and engineers fully vetted and do 100% plan set, which will then be reviewed by the state, you've got to procure the services with the lead agency through the grant funding that's been set aside. So I do know that there are some funding sources that are available between the Jackson House Foundation, between the CRA's, the Community Redevelopment Agency's contribution as well, and then also there are additional funds through the Vinnick Family Foundation. But as I said before too, when you asked me about the community and how they can be engaged, I don't know if the Jackson House Foundation has a donor site available, but I do think that there needs to be a development campaign to buffer whatever dollars are currently in place. And I can tell you that the state is very stringent about its dollars that it put up to ensure that we're following procurement guidelines. And so the funds that we tie into that, it's critical because if we don't do it the right way, if we don't procure the right way, if we don't go, just directionally or step by step through this process, there's a chance that portions won't get funded. And so that's why we are being mindful of that, is that we don't want to jeopardize any of the grant funding because we realize how tenuous the budget is, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Drumgo, for coming in and giving the observation and information. And if there's anything that we can do on this side, please let us know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we will be having the Ybor City Design Standard Review and New Construction by Ms. Bonds. Thank you.
All right, Heather Bonds, Historic Preservation Specialist. I'll be giving the design standard update today. I'll start with saying that Elaine gave me a great segue to show how empty lots can be, or how the design guidelines can guide new construction to an appropriate infill and how to complement the district. So thank you, Elaine, for that segue. That worked out. All right, just to recap from the last meeting, the existing guidelines were adopted nearly 40 years ago in the 1980s and need to be updated to serve the needs of the 2020s and beyond, address new materials, and provide specific directions. As members of the HPC, one of your roles is to take part in the development of design standards, including reviewing changes. To review the project objectives, we are working to create a set of modernized standards that will be codified and adopted to assist owners and developers in meeting their project goals in a historically sensitive way, provide specific measurements of success, address modern topics, be reformatted and better organized, conform to ADA compliant fonts for equal accessibility, and we need to include some user-friendly tools to help guide the projects. These are the 6 sections that we are developing. Today we are focusing on the new construction section. One of the primary objectives is creating a usable document, which begins with a better format. Here shows the direction and the 3 iterations of how we've got to where we are today. To become a better usable document, we've developed a one-sheet reference concept where each criteria subject can fit on a one-page sheet. This can be utilized in pre-application meetings, and instead of sending someone the entire standard book, we can give them individual sheets that specifically address their project. Here are the proposed draft components. We're going to start with the criteria, a standard, which is a one-sentence criteria, and it usually has the word shall to convey its importance. Then we've got the key terms, context, which is an introductory paragraph about why this criteria is important to the standards. Guidelines help provide the ways that the criteria can be met, and a summary of the permissible and not permissible actions. The proposed second page will have images, including some AI-generated images. And finally, here is one of our most vital and in-depth sections, and we've tackled this one first because it is so in-depth. There are 25 topical standards that we felt were the most important for new construction. And this is what we're presenting to you today. This section establishes standards for building design in the Ybor City Historic District and applies to the exterior of all new construction, including additions to existing buildings. The purpose of the Ybor City Design Standards for new construction is to guide future development in a manner to preserve the unique character of Ybor City while supporting new development. New construction must comply with this section, even if these standards are more restricted than other code sections. All uses shall meet the standards contained in this document. As a comparison, the existing section is 4 pages. Our draft is 57 pages. We've added context to the original guidelines, updated visual examples, provided clear permissible and non-permissible approaches, and added standards for areas previously not addressed, including buildable lots, murals, rooftop structures, parking lot standards, and new modern technologies. I will review some of the standards and the current changes we've made. At the end of the presentation, the HPC is free to make suggestions and comments to the standards presented or others that you desire discussion on. Today we are focusing only on the new construction section. This section guides developers who want to construct new structures in Ybor. The continuous theme throughout the section is compatibility. Compatibility with what is existing, what the historic character is of the district. These are the 25 topics we found most relevant to new construction. I'll be highlighting topics that were not previously addressed in the current guidelines and those that have the most impact. During board discussion, you are welcome to discuss any of these topics, even if I do not present on them today. The first topic is developable parcels, a new topic addressed in new construction. This section aims to clearly state which parcels can be developed and which should be avoided, such as lots with contributing structures, or combining multiple lots for large-scale developments, where a historic building pattern is established for the block with a smaller single-family home. All vacant lots shall be maintained and not be allowed to accumulate junk or become overgrown. Our previous example, scale. This is how it's currently presented in the guidelines and how we are proposing to present it in the draft. Scale is one of the most important criteria we consider for new construction. The scale of a new building and its relationship to neighboring buildings is a major component in establishing compatibility and harmony within the historic district. A structure's scale shall be designed to be consistent with the contributing structures on the same block or those concentrated nearby. Reduction in scale can be an effective method to differentiate new additions from the original construction. These are two new construction examples that we've used that are successful in the Ybor City. Here's how height is currently presented and our draft. As with scale, height is one of the most important factors to determine a project's compatibility with the district. The height of new buildings shall be consistent with the similar type and style of contributing structures within the district and conform to the zoning limits. This means that a new residential structure should compare to the historic 1 to 2 story structures in height or be designed to step down as shown in the bottom example, where the 3-story condos transition to a 2-story structure, which is directly adjacent to a contributing 1-story structure. This is how alignment, rhythm, and spacing is addressed in the existing guidelines and how the updated standards address these topics. The facade elements shall continue the established rhythm along the block. Spacing between buildings shall be kept consistent to the block. Designing the alignment and spacing of new construction shall respect the prevailing historic patterns, particularly as shown on Sanborn maps. The top picture shows a new construction project, which is one building, and how it is articulated in a way to continue the visual spatial dimensions common in the district. Here's how building materials is addressed in the 2 iterations. Building materials for new construction is an important topic. We acknowledge that advances in material manufacturing continuously produce new building options. The BOC will review substitute materials on individual cases to determine if these standards are met. Overall, any materials proposed shall be similar in design and appearance to historic materials found in the district. Vinyl and faux replicated materials are not permissible. Here are 2 new construction projects which successfully incorporated appropriate materials found within the district, including brick, 5V crimp metal roofs, wood brackets, arched windows, wood siding, and trim. Windows and doors on new construction shall be historically referenced and shall have the same insets, materials, proportion, and details as historic windows in the districts. Windows shall be appropriately trimmed with casings and sills. Doors with side lights and transoms shall have the similar Mullen treatments as the door. Even when interior uses do not necessitate windows, the exterior shall have a positive void to solid ratio historically referenced from similar type buildings, such as the Arturo Fuentes storage building, which was built in 2016 to replicate the historic cigar factories. Murals are a new area addressed in the updated standards. Tampa's murals have become iconic focal points for photos. These are also used to celebrate the history and culture of the area. Because of that, our standards provide guidance to ensure new murals do not damage the existing fabric or character of the district, even on a new structure. New construction has a unique opportunity to incorporate a mural as a feature of a new building with planned architectural borders or canvas areas as part of the initial design. To avoid disrupting the rhythms of the surrounding historic materials and colors, murals shall not be painted on the front facades nor encompass entire building elevations. Though we support public artistic expression and the overall content is not reviewed, only the placement and the color of the murals, murals may not contain violent, defamatory, obscene, or otherwise objectionable content, and murals may not include advertisements within the mural. Another new section, occupied roof structures, refer to additions or separate components, often a secondary function on a building, affixed to the roof of a structure, including decks, pergolas, dining and lounge spaces, and pool deck amenities. Here we show the new additions to historic structures on top a residential example showing new living areas pushed back from the front and the sides, Similarly, the restaurant constructed their amenity bar and extra kitchen pushed back from the front. The access stairs are tucked behind the front facade so not to be as visible. Principal parking lots have received increased attention lately, and we've included guidelines for these lots in the update. In general, lots must be improved, fenced, and have landscape buffers to reduce the visual impact of these large surface lots. Finally, we addressed modern equipment and technology, another area not previously addressed in the current guidelines, as many products were not established or invented in the 1980s. The technology topic will also be addressed in site elements, so this section is specific to new construction and how solar, HVAC, and other equipment should be considered in the initial design with shielding emplacements proposed. As I reviewed, each criteria has a corresponding standard. This is what staff, as reviewers, will measure each project to. We appreciate your input as to if each statement is reflective of what the BLC shall utilize when determining if a certificate of appropriateness should be issued. We'd also use those standards in a worksheet to be provided to the applicants to use for designing projects so that they meet each standard. Staff will be able to use the same set of criteria to evaluate that project and potentially add these evaluations to staff reports. This provides consistent evaluation transparency and what is expected from the applicants. These standards are to encourage successful integration of new construction into the historic district. Our goal is not to discourage new designs or modern needs, but to ensure the overall compatibility and appropriateness to the Ybor City Historic District. As guided by code, once the full draft is completed, we will notice for public input within the district, seek approval recommendations from BLC. The whole draft will come before this board for a recommendation to be adopted by City Council, then 2 City Council public hearings for final review and adoption. We have developed the draft by outlining each section and laying out the important themes to be included, and we've completed the draft of the new construction section that was presented to you today. Our 2024 goals remain as previously presented, and so far we aim to be on track. And I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in any conversation and suggestions you may have today.
Commissioners?
Excellent, excellent presentation. And the document's amazing. I did review it, not in depth, but I did review it, and it's not only well presented, well worded, all that, and you only made me feel a little old when you said it was 40 years old, since I was involved in the original, and it really needs updating, so long before this, probably. I just had a couple of questions, comments, more comments, I lied. The one thing, could you put up the table of contents again? This is like a minor, but I always go to, massing always seems to be the most difficult, or one of the more difficult things to explain to people and get. I'm sorry, the list of, the very list of the topics and oh, see, no, here it's,
Number 4, massing of
yeah,
production.
I don't know why I thought it was way later while I was reviewing the draft, but I was just gonna say to move it up to where scale and height was, but you already did that, sorry. And then the only other thing I noticed, or I would comment on is, I know this isn't easy, but the not permissible graphics, I know you can't really go around Ybor and find things that we don't like that are there. But I wonder if there are a couple of other examples that may be out there that we could disguise that they're not there. Again, I know we have to be careful about that, but
We did try to avoid using Ybor-specific
Yeah.
sites for not permissible. We didn't want to shame anybody. That's why most of the AI that I generated was for not permissible, so that it would not, anybody would not feel personally
Yeah.
attacked. We also looked in other cities as well for not permissible, but we did try to avoid Ybor
Yeah,
shaming.
it's hard to find kind of realistic ones, so I know that's.
And we're still
that's
working
tough.
on pictures. That's one of the things that may change
Okay.
from here to the final product. Some of the pictures we need to go out and
Okay, that was
retake, so.
one of my questions. I think, the only other, I think, question or thing I think would be helpful for us at maybe another meeting, especially on this section, is, would you review the code, the land development code requirements? Because we all know these are just the guidelines. So the LDC triggers, you know, when you do what. I think a refresher on those, not too long after we've seen these, would be super helpful to me and maybe others. You know, when these things, like additions you mentioned, I think that would be helpful for us to see how these two documents marry together.
Of course.
And unbelievable job, really, really looks good.
Yes, thank you. I think it's very user-friendly. And I like that with the additions on the structures and like the setback, I think that's super practical, even with the one with the picture of the stairway on the side. I think it'll give owners vision of what they can do, because a lot of times it's like you have all these restrictions and it's like, okay, then I can't do anything, but they're not given like, you know, hey, but you can do this. So I think it's very user-friendly, and I think even when you put in the picture of the McDonald's, I think that's a great example, because I think about Walmart. It's like they're all the same everywhere, and they just stick out like a sore thumb. But then I was like, oh, that McDonald's looks like it belongs in the area, and it's classy looking, you know, it just fits right in. So I think it's great, because I think it's very accessible, it's user-friendly, and it gives owners a vision of what they can do versus a lot of rules of what they can't do. And yeah, so thank you for your presentation.
Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. I do have quite a number of comments, and so if I could ask the chair, would you prefer me to read them? There are 3.5 pages at once, or maybe do general comments first and give other folks
You can do your
chance.
general comments, but, you know, be respectful of everyone's time, but
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Or you can also provide your comments, the more detailed.
In written form?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll just go through the general comments today. Because actually, I did read them fairly carefully, and I actually enjoy reading these things. And the problem with that is it means that I read it pretty tightly. And I think it's pretty exciting, and in some ways, the original documents are charming, and it'll be sort of sad to see them go, but these really are going to be so much better. I suppose, you know, maybe my first comment is that on the other hand, the other side of that, which I'm sure you're wrestling with, is that longer documents also intimidate people. So, you know, a book that went from, I don't know what the total was, 50 pages, now our one section is over 50 pages. Yeah, you know, I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. But overall, it's attractive, I think, in the appearance. I like the logical organization of it. And as you said in your presentation, there's the section title, the criteria standard, and then the text, and then the examples. And the fact that it's consistent all the way across is really helpful. I'd say, you know, like any code, the best guide for a standard is clear declarative statements. And certainly, I would say you've got that certainly through the criteria standards. I thought section 8 on orientation and section 19 occupied roof structures were two that struck out to me as being especially good in their being written as standards, and especially on the occupied roof structures, there's specific dimensional criteria there, which, I don't know, I did a lot of code research when I was working, and that's always really helpful. So I was going to ask about the difference between standards and guidelines, but I think you already hit on that. So yes, we're going from guidelines to standards, but I did see on page 6 in the introduction, though, they're both still used in a sentence, the last paragraph on page 6. And it seems to be that it is direction to the BLC that they are to look at these guidelines as standards. I don't know, I guess it struck me that when we're trying to get rid of the word guidelines, I was a little uncertain as to the meaning, except if it's meant as a direction to the BLC. And I guess, you know, what I was thinking, if it is intended as instruction about how to use this document, then maybe it should even be more straightforward and declarative to the board. After that, let me just say again, this is from experience with other codes, but I didn't see anything in the table of contents about having a specific section on definitions. Is that?
It's
That's
one
going
of
to
the
be in the
slides.
overall, this is just section 4, section 6 of the overall.
Was a glossary, I thought.
It'll be a glossary with definitions.
Okay, because,
Many of the definitions that are in the individual sections will be repeated in the glossary.
okay, well, I would ask that you go through and look for specialized terms. And some of the ones that I was thinking of, if we look at section 3 on building height, that would be a good example because, on page 11, because I believe that's exactly taken from chapter 27. So I like it when codes are consistent with their definitions, because from experience, I know you can get into trouble when they don't agree. One that I have some trouble with is section 5, which is about alignment, rhythm, and spacing. And the 4th paragraph, is that right? Or is it the 5th paragraph? It's the next to the bottom. And it's talking about the elevation pattern shall also align to be consistent, et cetera. However, I don't think that is strictly using the term floor elevation correctly, or at least not the way that I'm familiar with how it's submitted on building documents and how surveyors use the term. Because elevation is generally is a number that's based on a geographic datum. Mm-hmm. And the city uses, I think, the 1988, but anyway, and it's generally measured, you know, the information that appears on documents to the interior finished floor, not the porch. And similarly, the sentence about finished grade measured at a minimum of 12 inches above the top of footing is not really precise, because not all foundations are going to be footing foundations. I'm sure all the bigger buildings probably have deep foundations, so there might be a grade beam or something, but I don't find that a very precise way to set what I think you're after, which is to make porches and things aligned, or is it interior floor heights? I'm not sure.
It's the exterior that we're looking at to make sure that they're all equally aligned, but it's something that we can definitely take a look at, especially with new FEMA requirements, to make sure that we're being consistent with requirements across the board.
Okay. The thing about the 12 inches from the top of footing, I wasn't sure. There's something similar to that in the building code about minimum soil coverage on a footing, but it doesn't have anything to do with about where a property owner might choose to put the finished grade of the soil, et cetera. So I just think that could probably be tightened up some. And then another one that is a pet peeve of mine, because I've gotten into disagreements about this, is the use of the term awning and canopy. There are specific definitions in the Florida Building Code for each of those, and they are slightly different. And I am not certain that you are using them here
Okay.
in the same way. And the only thing I'll say is that in the Florida Building Code, a canopy is a permanent structure. And, you know, whether it, well, the thing is you never anticipate where there's, but I'm always, I guess, as a nervous person, I'm trying to anticipate where the problems, the conflicts might be later. So I would say that's a good one to look up, the definition. And again, if there is a section on definitions, some of these are the words that I think ought to be in there. I also saw references to CA, which I think I know what that is, but I don't know if it's, you know, would a general reader know certificate of appropriateness? I don't know. That seems like another good one.
Yeah, I know it's defined in the introduction, and it'll be defined in the overall introduction. at the
That I
beginning of-
haven't seen yet.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing, just a couple more things and then I'll let it go. Storefronts on page 35, section 15. That's a term, again, you know, coming from architecture. It's a term that's used to reference a particular type of aluminum and glass manufactured product. And I don't think that's really what you want or what the section is talking about. It seems like this section is really about the fronts of commercial buildings.
Commercial storefronts.
So even if it were broken into two words, store and front, or just, I think actually in the text somewhere you say commercial buildings, historic commercial buildings, so maybe that would be a better reference for that, because I see it and I just think of aluminum and glass storefront systems used on strip shopping centers. So the last thing as a general comment, there are a number of sections where they reference terms related to zoning. Zoning allowances on page 7, underlying zoning district on page 9, conform to zoning limits on page 11, allowed by zoning on page 13, etc. These examples seem to be setting up to say, I think, that these standards will take precedence if there's a conflict with zoning. I just wonder if that's legally correct, and if perhaps there shouldn't be a section somewhere explaining how zoning relates to this, unless it's already in the ordinance.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the legal department. That information is explained on the first paragraph about what's more restrictive. It's on the first paragraph, page 5. But this is also in the code about what specific standards, which these are in historical or overlay districts, are going to be more binding than what's in the zoning code if there is a conflict. So again, that's in chapter, it's going to be on page 5, the first paragraph of the design standards, but that's also mirrored in the code. And I can speak to you afterwards to give you the specific code section.
Are you referring to the introduction to the construction standards or to the whole document
On page 5,
of this section?
right, that we have before us today.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Have you concluded your overview?
I could say more, but we'll leave it at that for now.
I'm happy to take your written comments and look them over.
And just for a point of clarity, legal, would we enter this information as submitted documents at the end, or would we do that?
You're on your agenda, someone's gonna make a motion to receive and file all documents received. Are you referencing, Madam Chair, this,
From Commissioner Gibson.
oh, yeah, he could just email that, to staff, that's fine.
Want to make sure it's all, looked at and your views are taken into consideration.
I've got one more quick comment. I'm sure you'll run a spell check, but I'm just calling your attention to principles. You're using it two different ways,
Okay,
PAL and PLE. It should be PAL.
I'll make sure to double check. Thank you.
Spoken as a college professor.
I thought I caught most of those, but yeah, I'll go back through.
All right, commissioners, any other questions, concerns, or comments?
Well, if you'll give me a few more minutes, but I won't go for long. I'm only going to go then to the very first section, which is on developable
I'm
parcel.
sorry, are we able to? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, continue. I thought you had covered everything during your time of speaking.
If you'd prefer to get on with the meeting, yes, I can submit everything.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Vines, for this in-depth information on the Ybor City design standards, and from all the information that was gathered today. If you can come back again and implement that, or any updates, thank you for your time. All right. All right, and at this time, we will go over the landmark designation updates.
All right, we have 2 landmark updates for you. We have 2 new landmarks since our last meeting. We have the Marjorie Park Marina Gatehouse, which became a landmark on March 28th. And the John F. Germany Public Library was just landmarked on Thursday. So, we've got 2 brand-new landmarks. So thank you all for your support in bringing those forward and getting those recommended for approval for City Council.
Thank you.
Commissioners, with that, we move along our agenda to item number 9, new business. Does anyone have any new business for us this morning? Okay, seeing none. If we could request a motion to receive and file submitted documents and exhibits.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we move forward with accepting documents and exhibits.
Okay. And then before we adjourn for, excuse me, before we adjourn for the morning, we do have one more item on the agenda, the election of officers. Per your rules of procedure, this is supposed to happen in April. Obviously, we did not meet in April, so this is the next available meeting at which to have this election. We are missing one commissioner today, so you do have the option to wait until you have a full board and Ms. Shoecraft is available to join us, or you may go ahead and proceed with the election of the officers today. If we do proceed today, then we will be looking to elect a new chair or vice chair. You do have the option to retain the existing chair and vice chair, or you may elect new persons to those positions. So with that, whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Commissioners?
Who's the current vice chair? Okay. Well, if you guys want to continue, I'd like to move. I move that the current officers continue in their positions.
I second.
And do you
Assuming you can do
accept
that.
the positions?
Yes.
Yes.
Willing to serve? Yes. Okay. In that case, we need a show of hands, please.
In regards to the motion, okay.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed to keeping same position and moving forward? Seeing none, the commission has approved to keep the positions for this year going forward.
Okay, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you, congratulations. All right, at this time, the time is 10:10 on the dot, and we are adjourning for today. You all have a beautiful day. Historic preservation.
Thank you.